I want to thank you all for coming, first of all. I really appreciate it. See a lot of friendly faces, a lot of new faces. It's really great. My name is Mark Sweever. I was a biblical archaeologist, still am, but I'm not active in the field anymore. This is all about the discovery of the ancient biblical city of Sodom, which for many, many years, particularly in the 50s and 60s, a lot of people, naysayers, people who didn't believe in the Bible, claimed never existed. And we have definitive proof that it really did. So, to begin, in 1960, a group of archaeologists went to the southern tip of the Dead Sea and went off to the east a little bit and discovered a ruined town, burned and thoroughly destroyed, and claimed that it was Sodom. The dig was called Bab el-Dra, and until 10 years ago, that was the gospel, that was Sodom. The archaeologists did not use the Bible at all in identifying the site. And what's interesting is that for forever, until the Tal el-Hammam dig discovered Sodom, nobody had ever really looked closely at where it would be based on the Bible. And you gotta use the Bible. It's the only evidence. You can't use anything else. So, Dr. Steve Collins, who's the dean and lead archaeologist from Trinity Southwestern University in New Mexico, in 1999 went on a Holy Land tour. And while he was there, he was already an archaeologist and a respected one. He decided to go to Bab el-Dra and look at Sodom because from the map view, it didn't match up in his mind with the Bible. So he went and looked. He became convinced that couldn't be the location. He came home, and in 2000, he double mortgaged his home, went back to Jordan, went through all of the nutballs you have to go through with the government to get permission to search for a site and then excavate it. And he got permission. It took a while. It took a year, but he got the permission. And in 2001, he found Tal el-Hammam, which was on a previous picture, and you'll see it again, and decided that had to be Sodom based on the Bible. I'll explain that coming up. In 2010, I got my start. I had retired from the State Department. I had been retired from the military before then. And I decided I was happy retired, but then I had a serendipitous opportunity to become a biblical archaeologist, and I jumped at it. And so glad I did. So what we'll be talking about, I just gave you the introduction. We'll talk about what archaeologists do and what evidence there is that Tal el-Hammam is in fact Sodom. Oh, and please, we're going to have question and answer afterwards. But if I say something that you really don't want to wait to the end to ask a question about, raise your hand. I want this to be informal, casual, relaxed. I want you to enjoy it. If you got a question, if you can't hear me, if we need to turn the lights down, say so. Okay? So you can enjoy this and be comfortable. Okay. So, what do archaeologists do? Basically, it says it right there, they recover the past. And they record and study the materials left behind. Kenneth A. Kitchen is probably one of the foremost American biblical archaeologists. Great guy. He's written some wonderful books, and I've been able to consult with him a number of times. And brilliant, brilliant man. When we talk about archaeology in the Holy Land, and when I say the Holy Land, the ancient Near East, basically I'm talking about Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, primarily. Those countries. You can throw Iraq in there, but for the purposes of this, we're looking at Jordan and Israel. What is unique to archaeology in this part of the world is that you find tells or tals. And this explains what they are. A tell comes from the Arabic language, and basically we have this unique situation when ancient cities experience natural and cultural disasters and are destroyed. They are rebuilt right on top of the ruins. They don't go anywhere else. Why is that? Why do they do that?
Space.
Wood is very scarce in the ancient Near East. Mud brick is much easier to obtain. Communities all were built up, and we're talking at a time when, not very long after, we went from hunter-gatherers to settled communities on the planet. And they looked for arable land and water. Those two in combination are extremely rare. And because they're so rare, when something was destroyed, they built on top of it. So you have tells. And this is a cross-section of what one looks like. You go down to bedrock. If you go, and most archaeologists want to do that. When they start an excavation, they want to go down to bedrock because they want to go down to as old as possible. Right above bedrock, you've got the Chalcolithic age, which is basically the Copper Age. And then you have the Bronze Age, early, middle, and late. Then the Iron Age, and then you go on to Hellenistic, Roman, and Byzantine ages. That's kind of where they end. The archaeologists don't look for things newer than Byzantine age. But I want to make a point that's important enough to remember. When you're talking about the Bronze Age, you're talking about very little bronze. They had figured out, people had civilized enough, they could figure out how to make bronze. The previous age, the Copper Age, copper is too soft. They couldn't do too much with it. Bronze, they could do things with it. They built swords with it. They built plows with it. They could use them. They could make knives for the kitchen. So they had an application. But very few people actually had bronze instruments. They were extremely costly to make. And people still pretty much lived in the Stone Age. They used wooden and flint tools and stone, and that's fine. When we're done here, before you leave, if you want to look at some of the artifacts, what I brought with me, and please come up and look at them. My only request is please don't drop them. No, they will shatter, believe me. But these are the tools of the archaeologist's trade. These are what we use, and I can explain to you if you're interested. It can be a very tedious process at times. This I encourage you all to pick up and look at. This is a sling stone. This is the kind of a stone that David used to kill Goliath. When you think of a sling stone, you think of something that might be about this big around. No, this thing weighs 1.5 pounds. And this one was carved, was chipped into a round body, whereas David probably might have gotten his because he lived closer to the coast in Canaan. He might have gotten his from a stream bed or from the coast, but he would have looked for a rock that had been weathered, basically the same size and shape. This one came from Sodom, so when there's no rocks there that are shaped round. You have to chip them out. And then if you pick up the other artifacts here, on the bottom or the back of each one, I've got how old it is, what age it comes from. So please look at them afterwards. If you've got any questions about them, I'm going to be sticking around till everybody's gone, so I'll be glad to answer your questions. Paperwork is absolutely critical to an archaeologist. Paperwork. Why is that? Because archaeology is a unique science. It's a science that destroys its subject in the process of educating. And so you can't, an archaeologist today can't go back to Jericho when it was unexcavated and say, hey, I want to go ahead and see what's here. What he has to do is go to where all the artifacts and the records from the Jericho dig are located, and hopefully the archaeologists who dug Jericho did a good job. And I use Jericho for a reason because it's a good example. Jericho was first excavated by Flinders Petrie, a British archaeologist, in 1880. And he's also the father of biblical archaeology. He developed the methodologies that are used by archaeologists today. The rigor that is used to ensure that records are kept well, that they're accurate, that they're well marked out. He also insisted on instilling in archaeologists that every place you dig, you survey. Because you gotta know, you have to have a survey so you can be accurate in where things were found. And he did that. In 1948, another British archaeologist, probably one of the most celebrated female archaeologists, Dame Kathleen, wait a minute, I got the name written down. Kathleen Kenyon went back to Jericho and looked at the records and claimed that the records were done wrong by Petrie. And in fact, the city was destroyed 200 years after the Exodus. So it couldn't have been destroyed by the Israelites. She let herself get carried away by her own agnosticism. She didn't look at the records accurately enough. In 2000, Dr. Bryant Woods from the Associates for Biblical Research headed up another team to look at Jericho again and look at what Kathleen Kenyon had said. And he looked at those same records, he looked at the same artifacts, but he took very rigorous scientific methodologies and came back with a definitive conclusion that they did in fact place Jericho's destruction at the time of the Exodus. And if those records hadn't been accurate, who knows what would have been discovered. So it's essential for future archaeologists that good records be maintained, and when you're on a dig, generally you have about anywhere from 6 to 8 paid leaders that run the dig, and everybody else is a bunch of volunteers. On our dig in Tal El Hammam, and by the way, this is what I wore when I was digging. I had a couple of these shirts, a couple of these pants, and I alternated them and got them cleaned on a regular basis. But you need to be loose. This material wicks sweat, and you need to be comfortable. So, where was it? Okay, never mind. I'll remember. I'm sorry.
You said 6 paid people and everyone else volunteered. You said there were 6 paid people.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, like I said, this is guys. You were paying attention, that was a test. Okay. You generally have about 6 paid supervisors. And ours, we had about 8. And we had, on average, 35 to 40 volunteers. And normally, in a dig season, you'll go through about 4 squares. And a square is 6 meters by 6 meters. And it's always consistently. Now, Tal El Hammam was surveyed, and there are approximately 2,800 squares comprising the 90 acres that are Tal El Hammam. In the years since about 2002 to 2018, they've added a few, but from the time I was there, 2018, we had only opened and worked 12 squares. And now, that's a little bit of that's a little bit inaccurate in that several number of years, we didn't open new squares, we dug down in existing squares. So, it worked like that. Okay, I'm just going to give you a couple of background slides. Season 9 was the year before I joined, and this is at the very, very top of the dig. And they had, the previous season had done a 4-meter probe down into what we believe is the palace area. where the Royal Palace of the city was. And I came in on day one of season 10, and the dig director said, "This is your square." And I was very excited because this was the most important square of everything we were going to be doing that season. And so I got pumped. And so you see it on day one. About a week later, this has now been broken up. It's 6 meters, 6 meters by 5 meters. You always leave 1 meter on the same side of all the squares open as a bulk, and as you go down, it gives you a frame of reference on where you are in the dig. This is a little bit deeper, going down again, same place. Now keep in mind, we're digging these. Now we dig the surface with shovels, and we had a lot of Jordanian workers who were there to do the heavy lifting, and they did. They really amazingly did. And of course, you take all the tailings that you find and throw them over the side of the dig. But 1 week into the season, this is where we are. Then, about 3 weeks later, we had gone down and we had found a cedar beam that was flash burned, and we left it in place. It's called in situ. And took a lot of pictures and measured it, and then we picked it up and hauled it off. That cedar piece of wood was absolutely cinderized down to its core. There was not a single square centimeter that was not totally, utterly burned. This was the first indication we had of what destroyed the city. And it was really cool that we found it in my square. We were pretty happy. At the end of the season, and the season is 6 weeks, in Tal El Hammam, it's located 400 feet below sea level, down near the Dead Sea. We're only about 2 kilometers from the edge of the Dead Sea. We dug from the first week in February through the second week in March. And the reason we dug at that time is because the temperatures pretty much stayed around 80 degrees. And if you dig in the summertime there, the temperatures range between 120 and 130 degrees. Americans and Europeans can't do that. It'll kill us. Now, if you go to Israel and dig there, you dig in the summer. And for them, they would dig in the summer, and their volunteers were generally college students. And they come out and do this for college credit. Our dig, because of the time frame, February, most of our volunteers, and they came year after year, were retired people, were older people. And because of that, we didn't live in tents. We didn't live in shacks. We got hotel rooms. And that's a big difference. When I was in the Army, I lived in tents and shacks. When I retired, my idea of rough, primitive living is a double suites hotel. Oh yeah. So, this is the end of the season picture. And to give you a perspective on how far we had dug, that's the dig director and our senior Jordanian worker. And they're sitting on top, and that's how much we went through down in 6 weeks, which I thought was pretty cool.
And those walls-looking things were there, right?
Yes, these are all there. And as you notice, we carefully dug out. We would hit these walls, and we'd go down the walls. And actually, in several instances during the years that we dug, we found in niches in the walls, we found jewelry, which is pretty cool. Not gold or silver, but copper and bronze, and some with gemstones, mostly turquoise, because they had a lot of copper lines. But yeah, we would work around those things and go down. It was only when we would hit something more important, which meant older, lower, that we would reluctantly have to destroy what was above. But again, we took good pictures, we took good notes, we kept good records. It was okay. Anybody can come. And Dr. Collins, to his credit, was considered by most to be very, very meticulous and accurate with his digging. Any archaeologist could come and see the records and know exactly what had been done and exactly what we had found and where we had found it. For 3 years, because I had taken surveying in college, I became the assistant to the surveyor, who was a Jordanian guy, very good, and I was so helpful to him. He gave me a nickname that all the workers called me. He called me the Besh Mohandas, which means the chief engineer, which I got a chuckle out of. This is the same dig, the same area you just saw, expanded out in all directions in 2018, before I left. So substantial growth over 6 years. And this is just the palace area. Now, at the same time we were in the palace area, at a lower level, we were also excavating the temple that had been found, the main gate, the walls to the city, and residential homes, private homes of the average citizen in the community.
Did you find any human remains?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
And those slowed us down. Because when we found human remains, we would have to get the Bureau of Antiquities to come out to take them away and treat them to an Arabic, to a Muslim burial. Whether they were Muslim or not, they were there, they belonged in the country, they got that respect, much like our Native Americans do when they're found in digs and excavations. I want to digress just for a moment, and just to give you a comparison of what you just saw, I want to talk about Pella, and this is going to be very quick. Pella is a city that's located in the very northwestern corner of Jordan. Pella, after the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans and the rise of Christianity, became a sanctuary city. Christians were able to, for whatever reason, Christians could go there, and the Romans left them alone. So at one time, there were 20,000 Christians in there. This is at a time when there weren't too many more Christians in the whole darn world, but Pella was like that. Pella has been excavated for 45 years. And this is what their excavation looks like. I know I should have made larger pictures, but you have the height of the walls inside the main city are in some places 60 feet in height. The city goes from the main city to temples. They found 3 Roman temples that all had been converted to Christian churches. And you have them right here. This was the largest temple that became a Christian church, and so you have the pillars which were left inside to hold up the frame of the church, but the walls, these walls that were uncovered, are still Roman, and they were so well made. When you look at them up close, the gap between the stones is almost non-existent. There, very tight. The Romans knew how to build it. They really did. Okay, so let me come back to the meat of the discussions. What evidence is there that Tal El Hammam is Sodom? Okay, well, as I mentioned, there was a place called Bab el Dra. Now, Jerusalem is up here. Bab el Dra is down here, and some people believe that this is still Sodom. Unfortunately, the only people who still believe that are the 3 guys who discovered it and declared it. And they, now what's interesting, what's sad and to me unprofessional, they have repeatedly been invited to come to Tal El Hammam and see what the evidence is, and they refuse. And that's just unprofessional, but it happens a lot in archaeology. People really live and die by their reputations. Bab el Dra was destroyed about 2500 BC. That's too early, much too early. Abraham and Lot basically are about from 1800 BC. So we have Bible draws in the wrong place. Is Tal Helmond right? Well, here's what the Bible says. Abraham was very rich in cattle, silver, and gold. He had set his tent where Bethel and Ai were located. Bethel and Ai were in the highlands, right over here, overlooking the plain of the Jordan River. 100% of scholars today who do critical evaluations of Genesis 13, 1 through 12, say that the cities of the plain, the 5 cities of the plain, Sodom, Gomorrah, Zeboim, all were located in the plain north of the Dead Sea. Again, Babel Dra was in the south. And I'll show you, you couldn't even see it from Bethel and Ai. Lot, who was Abraham's nephew, also was rich. And the two families started having conflicts where they lived. And that was up in the highlands, up there near these two cities. So Abraham decided they needed to separate. And Lot agreed. You read the Bible, you know all this stuff. And Lot looked down at the valley and saw that it was green, it was lush, it was beautiful, and there were 5 cities there. Now they're small cities, except for Sodom, but there's 5 cities there. So he decided to journey eastward and settle his tents just outside of Sodom. So you have the valley of the Jordan, and it really looks, from above, and I'll show you, it really does kind of look like a disc.
That looks like a dog.
That's a dog.
Golly.
That's funny. Okay, I'm not the expert here, but wow.
You kind of are.
I know.
That's what we built you as.
That's why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, sorry about that. For some reason now I can't start it. Bear with me a moment. I'm very embarrassed like this.
Maybe, is that one of the archaeologists that maintains that, it's the southeast quadrant?
Okay. Okay, so,
That's awesome. I don't mind it myself.
I'm really sorry about that.
I like the fish and I like the hunt.
Mark, while you're going through that, what was the way the conversion was made to run the temple for, to the Christian, what did the Christian people do that convert, when they converted the temple, the Roman temple?
What they would do to do that, they would convert, they would get all of the non-Christian symbolisms, whatever, statues and all that, out of there. They clean it thoroughly. They would put in what they wanted, and then they'd have a priest sanctify it. I'm back on track. I apologize for that.
No worries.
So as you can see, Bab el Dra is way down to the south, but if you go due east from Bethel and Ai, exactly due east, you cross the plain and you come to Sodom. And it was very obvious to us when we're actually there. I went up to the highlands, even had a compass because I wanted to satisfy myself. Went straight east and there was Tal el-Hammam.
How is this compared to distance from Petra? I remember going to Petra.
Oh, Petra is about 2 hours south.
Okay.
This is about a half hour.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to, it takes longer to just cross the Jordan from Israel into Jordan than it actually does to physically move from place to place. You know, going through the checkpoints. So, Lot journeyed eastward, settled in the cities of plain, pitched his tents. This is what the valley looks like, and this is kind of a rare picture because it's usually not that clear. There's a lot of mist and hazing that goes on because of the sheer heat. So we know we have the evidence from the Bible where Sodom has to be. Where else can we find indications of Sodom's location? In Madaba, Jordan, there is an incredibly cool map called the Madaba map. It was made in 542 of the Common Era. It's located in Georgia's Orthodox Church in Madaba, Jordan. Unfortunately, the Muslims during their invasions and military crossing of Africa, they came stomping through Madaba and destroyed a good chunk of the map. But what's interesting about the map is it shows all of the ancient biblical sites. It was specifically it's on a floor, and it's made with mosaic. Thank you. It's made with very fine mosaic, and it's beautifully done. I was flabbergasted when I saw it, and albeit when you look at it, it has everything that was in the Holy Land up to 20 November 542. There are buildings that were put in Jerusalem in 543 that aren't on the map. So we have a pretty good idea about exactly how late this thing goes. One of the things that we have in the destruction, it says up here, Sodom and Gomorrah, question mark. Everything is marked. But if you look at the map, it has two images of two villages. At the very top, directly across from Jericho, which is just below Bethel and Ai, and there's these two villages that are in the valley north of or east of the Jordan River. They're not marked. A lot of archaeologists, myself included, truly believe that those represent Sodom and Gomorrah. Because Sodom and Gomorrah were the two important cities among the five. And Sodom was always known to be the most important because Sodom was always spoken of and written as the first city. It was always the first name. And according to ancient tradition, that made it the most important one. So, we take this as another potential evidence that this is Sodom. To give you an idea of what it looked like, this is what the it was a 90-acre city with walls, a defensive gate. You had the palace was located up in the upper part. You had the temple in the heart of the city, the lower city, and directly behind the temple, which is why one of the reasons why this was built here, are 5 natural springs that are still used today, and they produce a lot of bananas, a lot of vegetation, It's beautifully green there, and they've got a lot of water, and they don't have to rely, and because it's in the city, and they've got the wall, it could survive sieges indefinitely. It was never destroyed during its existence until it was destroyed by God. And that's what we're going to talk about now. The destruction of Sodom. You know, the story of Abraham and Lot belongs in the Middle Bronze Age. And it's not Iron Age, it's not early Bronze. It belongs right there in about 1800 BC, according to the Bible and interpretation of the Bible. Come on. So you have the likely biblical date, which is where Abraham and Lot lived. This is what Tal el-Hammam looked like about 2005. Now it looks substantially different because most of this top is gone. That's where the palace was, up here. And that's what we've really dug a big hole into since we got serious about it in 2010. And we have found a lot. Sodom was destroyed for its evil and iniquitous ways. The Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah sulfurous fire from heaven, and he annihilated the cities, the entire plain, and all the inhabitants and the vegetation that existed in the valley. Wiped it out. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's Genesis 19, 24, 25. Okay, here's what happened. This is the plain of the Jordan River right here. The Dead Sea is right there. What happened was, very simply, there was an asteroid airburst over the city. And we had the evidence of the asteroid airburst. It is very, very similar. It has tremendous similarities with the Tunguska Siberian airburst destruction that occurred in 1908. When the Siberian site was destroyed, approximately 500 square miles of trees were obliterated. And in the center, directly over where the airburst occurred, all the trees have been turned to instant cinder. They didn't burn, they simply got obliterated by the massive heat of the airburst. And it was the equivalent of quite a lot of TNT, nuclear bombs equivalent. The other big destruction aspect was that the asteroid went across the Dead Sea from basically south to north, and the pressure wave that it dragged with it, it was traveling at 35 to 40,000 miles an hour. When it hit, it was, and oh by the way, it was a stone and liquid meteor. When that hit about 1,200 feet above ground, the pressure of the atmosphere at that point became the equivalent of a solid wall and caused that thing to literally explode. When it exploded, it pushed down an instant burst of about 6,000 to 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit heat. Wow. I mean, just incredible. And it also, because of that drag, it dumped 12 trillion gallons of Dead Sea water across the valley, flooding the valley to a depth of 5 to 7 feet. The Dead Sea is incredibly alkaline and poisonous. And having that much water dumped on it would have destroyed everything. All the people, all the land, and it would have killed the ground for centuries. The Bible says for 7 centuries. We have paleo-agricultural evidence that that land was dead for 700 years. So it's very consistent because that's what agriculturalists study. And we went to them and they contributed to our understanding and our efforts. This is what there's a name. There you go. This is pottery. If you look here, what it is if you look at the backside of these pieces, it looks like pottery, like I have sitting over here. But the surface that you're looking at was instantly fused into glass by that 6 to 8,000 degrees temperature. Instantly fused, instantly cooled. So turn looking like that. And we call it trinitite. And with the reason, and we call it trinitite because it's very much the same kind of thing that was discovered after the Trinity nuclear bomb test of July 16, 1945. They went out after the test, they looked at the sand around the test site, and they found all kinds of exactly this kind of stuff, where the sand had turned into glass. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So with the first that an asteroid was hit, why would there be anything left to find?
Good question. If the asteroid had been a metallic asteroid, it would have gone into the ground and it would have cratered it. But because at that point, 1,200 feet above the ground, the air became so dense that thing traveling at 35 to 40,000 miles an hour would have been the equivalent of hitting a brick wall and just exploding into a million pieces. And exactly, and because it created that massive amount of heat, and it was stone, there would have been no evidence left other than the residual evidence of what had happened. That's why when we actually, in 2017, we sent 3 teams of people around the Jordan Valley and went to talk to farmers and asked them, showed them pieces of this trinitite that we had found near Sodom, and asked them if they found it. And we had some of them say, "Oh yeah, come here," and they chose mounds of it.
Wow.
Just a lot. So that's why you don't see that kind of destruction of a metallic meteor. It all was destroyed in the air, and basically dust hit the ground, and nothing more. Answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. No, as I said, stop me if you've got a question. This is another piece of desert glass that was found 4 kilometers southwest of Tel Hammam. Just an example. We found a bunch of these examples, but I just wanted to show you what we were finding. So, what have we got? We've got a Bronze Age civilization located on the Jordan Disk that was an absolute cultural center, flourishing continuously for over 2,500 years. Sodom was also very, very important. The reason it was so large and so healthy is because it sat astride 3 different trade routes. And so it was a wealthy city. This Bronze Age civilization came to a violent end, and the area remained unoccupied for 7 centuries. Unoccupied. Nobody could live there for 700 years. This was the best watered agricultural land in the entire region. And it remained without cities, towns, or even people after the Middle Bronze Age to destruction. Now, this, of course, is what unaffected pottery looks like. Okay, now comes the fun part. Do we have evidence why the city was destroyed? You know, you think, okay, it was destroyed for its iniquity. How do we figure that out? Well, fortunately, we did. And it's kind of cool. You remember what it talks about in the Bible, that the angels who visited Lot to tell him the city was about to be obliterated, and for him to get out of town, the people wanted to abduct those angels. They shouted to Lot and said to him, "Where are these men? Bring them out. We want to be intimate with them." Pretty disgusting.
Sounds like San Francisco.
What we discovered was that Sodom embraced institutional pederastia in its time period. And this all came from the Minoan Empire, which was an ocean-based, which was a Mediterranean-based culture that had tremendous influence because of their ships constantly going out and conducting trade. Something else we found. We couldn't figure out when we uncovered the city gate to Sodom, we realized after we fully excavated it, it looked nothing like any other gate in Canaan. No other gate. You know, Ashkelon, Damascus, anywhere in the area, in Canaan, all along that area, this gate was unique. We had a group of archaeologists from around the region, including several who were experts in the Minoan culture, come to visit and see what we were discovering. And as soon as these two people from Crete came and looked at our gate, they said, that's a Minoan gate. And they showed us all the evidence about other Minoan gates. No other Minoan gate anywhere in the ancient Near East. So we have a very clear connection to a very bizarre culture. We also found at Tal el-Hammam Minoan motifs. They're the only culture in the region that had bullheads with the horns coming down. The only one. No other culture had it. Yet we found several, actually, these are two. We found a total of about 12 pieces that were clearly these bullheads. They're found in Tal el-Hammam. You can't find them anywhere else in the ancient Near East. You just don't. What is pederastia? If you don't know, I won't dwell on it. I'm not going to talk about it, but I'll let you read it. It is a culture it's a warlike culture, and it's very unique to certain cultures. Anybody need more time?
No.
Okay. It was adopted by some other Aegean cultures. None of them have survived to today. The one that sort of did was Sparta. Sparta embraced that same culture. And they were a very warrior-like state. And believe it or not, one of the incentives that spurred the Athenians to take them on and defeat them was the Athenians did not want this encroaching into Athens culture. So they built up their army to fight, and they were not a warrior class, but they succeeded. This type of a society would have been absolutely abhorrent to Abraham and the Hebrews, as well as many of the other cultures in Canaan, in the Judean highlands. This would have been the atrocious sin that the city committed, that God would destroy it. So, wrapping up, the narrative clearly marks out the location of the 5 cities that are claimed. These cities exhibit all the cultural influence described in Genesis. There is a reason for this. It's not just coincidence. This is another perspective of the emerging palace that we have. If the past archaeologists and biblical scholars had taken the Sodom tale seriously, It would have been found years ago. But they didn't. People did not look at the Bible, read the Bible, to learn where Sodom should be. And oh, by the way, this is going to be a free advertisement. If you haven't read my book, Once Holy Mountain, you got to use the Bible to find Mount Sinai. You can't find it any other way. And that's what my book does. Okay? So much for that.
Hit him.
Come on.
That's a big start.
That shouldn't be.
Molly.
You know Molly did that while you
Yeah.
I'm going to Sodom, city, host there. The God ancient Sodom.
Did you say what the name Sodom meant?
I'm sorry?
Did you say what the name Sodom meant?
Sodom?
Yeah.
It means, yeah, I did know that. I haven't thought about it in a while. It means community of trade. I'm almost done. Come on.
So now we know who did it.
Yeah, I tell you. Yeah. So,
You know, we
I can't find my cursor. I'm so sorry. This is extremely frustrating. Okay, so if it had been discovered, there would have been nothing for us to say. But people didn't look at the Bible. We did. They didn't find it. We did.
Imagine that. Right where God said it.
So I've talked about it briefly, the 5 cities of the plain. You have Jericho, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. And you have, this is where they're all located. And again, Tal Hammam is the largest. From the top of our hell, in the far distance, you can see there's Jericho. If you look really close, unfortunately, you're not going to see it because of the distance, but about 2 kilometers away from where we are is another small city hell that hasn't been excavated. We believe it's Gomorrah.
Makes sense.
All the other cities were daughter cities of Sodom. What that means is Sodom was the only fortified city. In the event of a conflict, in the event of some danger, the other cities will all evacuate their people and they go into Sodom for protection and security. And when the danger was gone, they'd go back to their cities and if necessary rebuild them. But they did not have walls, whereas Sodom was 90 acres. This little one where Gomorrah is only about 20 acres. Very small. Not many people live there, but that's what it was. So, I apologize for the computer goofing up, but
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Of course, we know biblically that Lot and his 2 daughters, how did they escape?
Well, you know, I think the Bible says.
I'm looking at the.
Where did they go?
Language-wise,
They went, according to most scholars I've read, most articles I've read, they left Sodom and they went south along the eastern coast of the Dead Sea until they came upon a cave, and they went into that cave for safety. And that's where they escaped. Is there any other questions? Yes, ma'am. No, do not apologize. No. I am looking, if you've got a question, this is the time to ask it. You'll probably forget it next time, by the next time when you see me next.
You said the bull with the horns down was specific to the Minoan culture. What is the significance of the horns being down?
To be very, no, there is a difference. It was to distinguish them from the cultures in Crete, in the southern tip of Greece, where the bull was very popular, and the Spartans used the bull as one of their symbols, and all of them had the horns up. We don't know. We have found no records specifying why, and there have been a lot of written things that have been discovered about the Minoan culture in their land. But nothing has explained why those horns are down. It's all scholarly speculation that it was to distinguish them from the others. Yes?
Would the people of Sodom and Gomorrah in that area have been from the tribe of Ishmael's people?
We don't believe so. We don't believe so because they did not favor either the Hebrew or the laws. They didn't follow the laws of Abraham and any of his sons. So because they didn't, and in fact, if you do look, there are some speculations in the Bible that Abraham was not happy that Lot moved in so close to the city, even though he argued with God to preserve more than just nobody. But no, that's the best answer I can give you. Anybody else? This is quiz the teacher. Yes, sir.
So, if it wasn't already discovered before you started archaeology, how long did it take for you guys to discover the site?
Well, okay. We started our excavations in 2001. And by 2010, that's a long time, but in 9 years, we became confident that we had Sodom. All this time, starting around 2006, our director, Dr. Steve Collins, was writing articles talking about what he was finding and why he was thinking this was leading him towards Sodom. And then in 2010, he published a paper saying, we believe for the following reasons that we have found Sodom. And that's when the archaeology community started taking notice. And we started seeing every year we would have groups of archaeologists coming to our site in Palo Alto and looking for themselves, going to the museum and seeing the artifacts. And every time somebody showed up, they walked away convinced that this was Sodom. So I would say, although the widespread acceptance didn't come till about 2015, by 2010, people were really starting to seriously consider that, and it's hard to argue against the word of the Bible. We would encourage them, go up to Bethel and Ai. And fortunately, Bethel and Ai have both been excavated. We know where they are there, and so we can put somebody right in between them, looking down in that beautiful valley and say, can you see anywhere else that it says go due east and not find Palo Alto? And it was that clarity that convinced people. Yeah, we knew we were talking about. Today, like I said, the only 3 guys I know who don't accept are the guys who founded Baba Rock, because they don't want to admit that they were wrong. They'll destroy their reputations.
So, it sounds like there's an oversight organization that you apply to. I mean, you can't just be like an amateur archaeologist
No.
going to start with a hammer somewhere and start excavating. There's not. What is that group, or who do you have to?
There is an International Association of Archaeology. They have 2 conferences a year where archaeologists from all over the Middle East, these are specifically biblical archaeologists, come and discuss their findings, discuss potential new hunts. But one of the biggest checkpoints are the governments themselves. Israel, Jordan, Egypt, if you're going to dig, you have to really prove, number one, your credentials. Number two, you've got to have one of their people in your leadership group, and you have to be very clear on what you're looking for. So that's probably the single biggest checkpoint that everybody has to go through. That's why it took Collins a year to just go through the hoops, and a lot of that was the bureaucracy, but a lot of it was convincing the Ministry of Antiquities that he really knew what he was talking about, he was a qualified archaeologist, and he had a reputation. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
I wish you wouldn't apologize, because there is nothing to apologize for.
That one person at commander's call.
I am asking a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you were responsible for an area of digging that was palace. How did you know that the palace was
We
going to
didn't.
be there?
We didn't. What we did is the year before I joined the dig, they did that 6-meter borehole. It's a little 2 meter by 2 meter borehole. They went straight down, and just going down, they cut through several very strong, very clear mud brick walls that were above the norm that you would see in a palace, not just a regular building. And even a temple wouldn't be as good as a palace. It convinced Steve Collins that the palace probably was here. So that's when, so he decided that we would start our dig, the 10th season there, and that's when he gave it to me. But that's the reason. Plus, we also had other digs where we could get a good idea, because cities were built similarly. You know, you look at Sodom, you look at Ashkelon, you look at Tyre. These were 3 cities in the early Bronze Age that were virtually the same size. When you look at their excavations, they were built very similar. So they didn't have the same gates. They were the same on that, but they were built very similarly. And where the temple was and where the palace was, you could kind of speculate. Now, that was no guarantee that we were going to be down in the palace. If we had gone down, if I had opened up that 6 by 6 square, and at the end of the season we'd gotten a big bust, we probably would have started somewhere completely else the next year. We would have just recognized that we didn't hit it. And that happens. But we were lucky, that was right, and it turned out being the palace. Yes, ma'am.
So, aside from like the jewelry that you found in the walls, because you were super pumped to be where you were, what was the most interesting thing you found?
Oh, hands down for me was that
Wood.
that not the wood, no, it was the scale, the bronze scale. Because, like I mentioned at the beginning, bronze was so rare. I mean, they had discovered it, but it was so expensive to make something out of bronze that very few people had it. And because this was before coinage, so they would use gold, silver, bronze, and copper for trade, but they weren't coinage. It was all based on weight. And so that scale was extremely important, so much so that they insisted on all scales being bronze and being very exact.
How big was Old Jerusalem in area now?
Old Jerusalem in area was 120 acres. Yes, sir.
Best guess, where, among you folks, where is the Ark of the Covenant?
Okay. We've got theories. Seriously? Okay, I'll tell you what I believe. Yeah, no, not even joking. I believe it's in the Vatican.
In the back.
It's buried in the basement of the Vatican. And they don't want anybody to see it, they don't want anybody to know about it.
That's a good answer.
The Nazis looked for it pretty hard. They were lean with the bed.
That's true, they were.
With the Holy Grail too, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no, there's. I am not a conspiracy theorist, but I think the world would be amazed at what is buried in the Vatican. I truly do. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have a little bit of motive, ulterior motive in my question, but because
Fire away.
I'm back in Genesis 13 a little bit. But as God describes the tribes that were in the Valley of Sodom in Genesis 13,
right,
and what those people were, did you find any evidence that would indicate, like how high were the walls of the bed chambers? How big were the sleeping platforms?
Okay. We found no sleeping platforms because of the obliteration. But the walls in general were between 4 and 5 feet high.
Does it fit a giant?
Yeah. That's pretty small, but yeah, that's because the doorways were 3.5, 4 feet. You know, so, and those were in the wealthier houses.
Because I'm sure you're well aware of how God describes the inhabitants.
Oh yeah.
In Genesis 13.
Yeah.
They were 10 to 13 feet tall.
Yeah. Okay. I could give you a whole lecture for 3 times the length that I've given you this evening on numbers in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Numbers in the Bible are very, very challenging, and even today, most scholars don't fully understand them. And just to give you a simple example, and I'll try to keep this short because I know I'm way over time, ain't I, Terry?
We have to go Sunday afternoon.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, we're set, guys.
You're fine.
The word Aleph in the Hebrew language means 1,000. But that's only one meaning. It also means a squad, a group. It means several different things. And you have to carefully look at the context to figure out what the word really means. Aleph, 1,000, in that time and age was like 1 billion or higher today. You know, we only started using 1 billion in the early 1900s.
When the Democrats got control of Congress.
Right, yeah, that's right. But Aleph, so you have Aleph used in the Bible to describe, a group of tribes. You'll have Aleph used to describe 1,000 pieces of silver. You'll have it used for several different ways. One of the greatest examples of the use of Aleph is from the book of Joshua, where they are destroying Jericho. And in the Bible, I forget the exact place, but in the Bible it says that a wall fell on 23,000 soldiers when it collapsed. Now, does anybody here believe there's a wall anywhere in the world that's going to drop and kill 23,000 soldiers? Nobody. But that's what the Bible says. But it doesn't say that. It says that in the Greek translation from the turn of the century, from just before Christ's time, where they didn't know what the hell they were doing half the time trying to understand the language. But if you say Aleph stood for the 23 leaders of these thousands, then it makes sense. Those 23 leaders could have been hit by a wall while they were conferring and killed. It's reasonable. It's not reasonable that wall fell and killed 23,000 men. So you've got to understand the context. And that's the way it is with numbers all over. Plus, you're further confounded with numbers because so many numbers in the Bible have religious or cultural importance, 7, 20, 40. You know, you've got a bunch of them like that, and they are used. 120 is the perfect age of a man, according to God. So you have to understand, in some cases, the numbers were fudged. Not because anybody was trying to lie, but because they were writing and they were recording based on their cultural understanding.
Which is in your book.
Which is in my book. That's right. I didn't say that. He said it. This is Yes, sir.
So, as far as these, have you been using any of the advances in like ground penetrating radar, trying to map out some of these things? Or is it so thick they won't show up on like
No, we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to. For one thing, the Jordanian government doesn't want us using ground penetrating radars, metal detectors, any of that stuff. They don't want it. And for another, a lot of archaeologists also don't want to use them because they're afraid that the radar is going to miss something small. And then they go digging down and they ruin something that's priceless. So a lot of archaeologists, I've discussed this with a bunch of them, they don't want to see metal detectors or radar. There are some exceptions. Sometimes you'll find you'll have somebody excavating and they start finding a lot of metallic objects, or they're looking for specifically something large like an esophagus or something like that. Then they may get permission for a very selective use of a ground penetrating radar or metal detector, but normally that will only happen if somebody from the country's Bureau of Antiquities is right there when it's used. And in fact, in Jordan, you can get permission. It's laborious, it costs money, and then the Jordanians will hold it, and then they'll bring it out for you to use. You'll use it, and they'll take it right away from you. They don't want. See, part of the problem with that, the reason for that, is because there are a great number of we call night diggers, people who go into the dig areas late at night and try to dig up things that they can sell on the black market, and it's a real problem. And we don't want the governments don't want any possibility of these kind of people getting these things and using them.
That makes sense. They weren't out with the pyramids and all.
Oh yeah.
Everything's stolen.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, all of them. You know, there have been very few that weren't stripped and robbed by the night diggers. Yes, ma'am.
Are there still a lot of people digging over there? And if so, do you get updates when they find cool stuff?
I'm sorry?
Are there still a lot of people digging over there? And if they are, do you get updates when they find?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I'm on the website. I regularly check it. But there are. I have a map. I obviously I didn't bring it. I don't want it. I mean, it's on my computer. But I have a map of just Israel and all the known hells that existed, that have been identified in Israel, whether they've been excavated or not. It's 5,000. I mean, you look at this map and it's just dots all over it. It's just amazing. We used to make a joke. You couldn't throw a cat without hitting a dig in Israel. There it is. But you really do. I mean, you get on the roads, you're driving, you see these mounds, and you know what they are. All over it. Yeah.
You see on like YouTube videos and things like that they had found I'm not sure what it was actually made of, but they were saying that possibly could be Lot's wife. Is that near that particular? No.
You know.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Even though it doesn't rain a lot, it's been 3,000 years. If there's a pillar of salt that was once upon a time Lot's wife, it has long gone. Long gone. I mean, it's just anybody who claims that this pillar is Lot's wife, I want to check their foreheads. Yeah, because it's ludicrous. It truly is. Sir.
Well, what is amazing is the piece of wood that you found and the way that it is a pillar of salt.
Well, essentially it is, except that no one claimed that God came down and put his finger on it and fried it.
Right.
We've got evidence, solid, firm, scientific evidence that proves what happened to it. And a pillar of salt, we know, let's face it, I believe the Bible is factual history. If she got turned into a pillar of salt, she got turned into a pillar of salt. No question about it. But the fact that that pillar still exists, it's like, I'll give you another example. Let's do it. People claim that, that Mount Sinai is in the Western Arabian Desert. And the reason it's in the Western Arabian Desert is because the Saudis are protecting the land because it's full of all these gold relics that date back to the Hebrews being on Mount Sinai and making the golden calf. And when they had to leave, God told them, Moses told them, take all those valuables, drop them, leave them, and go. And they're saying, well, you see, that's proof that that's over there. No, nothing of the kind. For one thing, Mount Sinai was in a normal pathway of Bedouin travel. The Bedouin were visiting there on a regular basis. Without God there's nothing important about that mountain. It's utterly, that's why I call my book Once Holy Mountain, because it was only holy when God was there. After that, it meant nothing to anybody. But when the Israelis dropped their treasures, within a year, the Bedouin would have found and taken all of it. It would have never been found. It would have been gone. It's already. I guess, please come and see the artifacts if you'd like to. And I'll stick around and please come up and ask me any questions. But thank you so much. I hope you. You don't have to go to Jerusalem.